The humid air of the Carboniferous forest was thick, heavy, and unusually vibrant, vibrating with a low-frequency hum that signaled the presence of a predator unlike anything seen in the modern world. High above the club moss trees, a meganura, a giant dragonfly with a wingspan exceeding 70 centimeters, locked its multifaceted eyes on a target below. It did not flutter like the delicate insects of today. It banked and dived with the predatory grace of an eagle. With a sudden strike, its spine-covered legs snatched a primitive amphibian from the mud, the sheer force of the impact echoing through the dense green canopy. This was a world where the micro had become macro, a landscape dominated by the buzzing of titans. The secret to this monstrous growth lay not in the soil, but in the very air these creatures breathed. During this era, roughly 300 million years ago, the Earth's atmosphere was undergoing a radical chemical shift. Massive forests covered the supercontinent of Pangaea, pumping out oxygen at an unprecedented rate. Oxygen levels climbed to nearly 35% compared to the 21% we breathe today. For the insect kingdom, this was a biological gold mine. Because insects breathe through a system of tiny tubes called trachea that rely on passive diffusion, their size is strictly limited by how far oxygen can travel into their internal tissues. In this hyper-oxygenated atmosphere, the limit was shattered, allowing bodies to swell to sizes that would be physically impossible in our modern world. Beneath the towering ferns, the ground belonged to the giants of the undergrowth. Arthropleura, a relative of the modern millipede, reached lengths of over 2.5 meters. Its segmented body, armored in thick chitin, moved like a heavy armored vehicle across the forest floor. These were not the skittish pests found under a garden rock. They were the apex herbivores and occasional scavengers of their domain. The sound of their hundreds of legs scuttling over dried leaves was a rhythmic thrumming that warned smaller creatures to stay clear. Despite their size, they were part of a complex, violent ecosystem where every inch of territory was a battlefield of biological engineering. The battles fought in these ancient marshes were struggles of immense scale. Scorpions grew to the size of dogs, armed with stingers that could pierce the skin of the earliest land-dwelling vertebrates. The high oxygen levels provided these invertebrates with nearly unlimited energy, fueling metabolisms that allowed for sustained high-speed pursuits. A hunt in the Carboniferous was a clash of exoskeletons and mandibles, a high-stakes game where the winners were determined by armor thickness and the speed of their strike. The atmosphere didn't just make them bigger, it made them more efficient, more aggressive, and more capable of dominating their environment. However, the reign of the giant insects was tethered to the chemical composition of the sky. As the millions of years rolled by, the Earth began to change. The vast coal swamps started to dry up, and the global climate shifted toward more seasonal extremes. As the lush vegetation diminished, the oxygen levels began a slow, inevitable decline. For the giants like Meganura and Arthropleura, this was a death sentence. Their massive bodies, once a sign of dominance, became a liability. As the oxygen concentration dropped, their internal tissues began to suffocate, and the biological ceiling for insect size began to lower. The extinction of these giants was not a sudden explosion, but a long, agonizing retreat into the shadows. Generation after generation, those who were slightly smaller found it easier to survive and reproduce. The titans were forced to shrink or vanish entirely. Evolution began to favor the compact, the agile, and the energy efficient. The skies were eventually cleared of the hawk-sized dragonflies, leaving the aerial corridors open for the rise of the first flying reptiles, and eventually birds. The great oxygenation had ended, and with it, the era of the six-legged monsters. Reflecting on this lost world reveals the incredible plasticity of life. It demonstrates that the size and shape of a creature are not just determined by its DNA, but by the very chemistry of the planet it inhabits. We look at a modern dragonfly and see a harmless, glittering jewel of the pond, but within its genetic code lies the memory of a time when its ancestors were the terrors of the sky. The story of the ancient insects is a testament to a time when the Earth's atmosphere was a fuel for giants, proving that under the right conditions, the smallest of creatures can rise to become the most formidable rulers of the world.